Hi, I'm Chris Wright and I'm a Managing Consultant here at OneSpatial. Today's webinar, entitled Accomplishing Even More with Esri Web Mapping Technology, is the first in a series of webinars that we'll be holding. My focus today will be on the Geocortex web mapping software. Here at OneSpatial, our focus is on making data smarter. We do this in all areas, from data capture to maintenance and finally to deployment. We believe in building solutions that best suit your needs. For many years, OneSpatial has been a business partner of Latitude Geographics, who developed the Geocortex software suite. OneSpatial is also a silver partner of Esri, and we have embraced the Esri software stack to include our technology. Today, my focus is on the Geocortex software. Geocortex helps you do more, faster, at less cost and risk, with better results. Faster because there's lots and lots of out-of-the-box pre-configured tools that enable you to rapidly build a solution. At less cost and risk, the Geocortex software is future-proofed. When any new Esri software comes out, it's already been tested and deployed by Latitude Geographics. With better results, you can build targeted solutions to meet your customers' needs rapidly and efficiently. So who uses Geocortex? Well, end users, GIS professionals, developers, managers and consultants are but a few. End users are normally seeking a positive web-based mapping experience, something that's easy and simple to use. GIS professionals are aiming to create powerful end-user experiences. Developers who are wanting to build better solutions in a faster and more efficient manner. Managers who are seeking to leverage off the Esri technology to provide compelling, demonstrable return on investment. And finally, consultants who are aiming to jumpstart their customers' projects. In this ever-changing world that we live in, GIS professionals are challenged all the time to better do what they have done before. There's too much time spent on doing menial tasks. There's a proliferation of platforms, mobile apps, websites and desktop and so on. And stakeholders are making managing the environment more difficult. There's never enough budget, and it's difficult to keep up with new shifting stakeholder requirements. And rapid technology changes makes it hard to keep up in this ever-changing world. So it's time for a change and a time to adopt a new approach. I am often asked the difference between Esri's web app builder and the Geocortex software. There is an easy answer to this question, and that is, if you can do what you want to do with Web App Builder and its templates, then stick with it. It's a great little tool. If, however, you want to extend the templates, then this is the time to consider Geocortex. Geocortex is all about configuration and not developing. Extending Web App Builder templates involves software development and all of its associated complexities. With Geocortex, you configure interfaces rapidly and efficiently using a management interface tool, which you'll see in a short time. Geocortex sits nicely between Web App Builder and full-blown website development. Its ease of use means that you can rapidly build and deploy solutions to meet the needs of your customer base. Okay, so that's the end of my slides. So let's have a look at Geocortex in action. So I'll just start up my Geocortex Manager interface now. And you can see that I've already got a lot of sites already configured, but I'm going to add a new site. So I click on Add New Site. I then give the site a name. I'm going to give it a name of Webinar. Optionally, I can add a description for this site. I click Next. At this point, I'm just going to create an empty site. You can optionally reference information from ArcGIS Online or Portal. You can reference existing sites or even create a layer catalog. So let's go ahead and just create our empty site. I click Next and I click Finish to create that empty site. We're now guided on to what we need to do next. And if you look down the left-hand side, there are a series of tabs that we can configure and modify our site. And the first tab that we're pointed to is the Add Map Services. So we really want to add some information to our site. So I click on Add Map Service, and then I go to a service connection, and I've got a local ArcGIS server here, so I can click on that, and then I can click on OS Master Map data and maybe use this as backdrop data. So I'll say this, add this as a base map, and I click Add to Map. What I can then do is also set the initial extent of this data. The initial extent is the extent at which the viewer will open up at when a user clicks on the link. So if I set my initial extent to be here by clicking on this button, and then I can save my site. What I want to do next is maybe add some foreground data to this site. So again, I go back to Add Map Service. I click on my service connections, click on my local ArcGIS server, and then click on this foreground data. And you can see here we've got some foreground information. This is actually assets from Staffordshire County Council, and I've got permission to use their information. So I add this to the map, I save my site, and what you'll notice immediately is that when we add it to the site, by default, it comes out solid. So we can't see the underlying master map data. What we can do though is we can edit the map services, and we can go to the display settings tab, and we can change the translucency or the opacity of this data and say make it 55%. If I apply those changes, save my site, and then go to the map tab, what you'll see is that we can now see through our foreground data to the underlying master map. The next thing we might want to do is we might want to add a geometry service to our site, which allows us to do measurements and calculations about geometries. So I can click on my geometry tab. By default, it will try and use an external geometry service, but if you want to use your own local geometry service, you give it the service URL here. And I just happen to have that URL up here, so I can copy the URL for my local geometry service and I can paste it into this box here, apply those changes and save my site. Now back at the map tab, we really have a basic site set up and ready to go. So I guess what we next need to do is to add a viewer. So let's go ahead and add a viewer. To add a viewer, you simply click on the Viewers tab and then click the Add Viewer button. When you add a viewer, you give it a display name. So I'll use the HTML5 viewer as a display name, and we're using the HTML5 viewer template. HTML5 is preferred these days over Silverlight. Click on OK, and this adds my viewer template. And you can see down the left hand side we've got lots of configuration options that we can do with our viewer, and we'll change some of these as we go throughout the presentation. But the first thing I'm going to do at this point in time is I'm going to change the toolbar. So by clicking on the toolbar button, you can see that we've just got a few basic tools in our out-of-the-box toolbar. But what I can do is I can load a preset toolbar, and I can load a WebGIS full toolbar. So I click on this button, and you can see now I've got an awful lot more tools available to me. It says the toolbar is modified, so I go down to the bottom, I apply my changes, and then I save my site. Now I can launch this viewer and have a look at it in my application. So I hit Viewer Info and I click on Launch in Browser. So this is my viewer. You can customize the box that shows there, which has your organization on it. You can customize the menu bar here, and you can change the color and styling of any button that you see on the screen. This is what you get out of the box by default. You can see our map here. We have an option here that shows us all of the layers that we've loaded and the layer swatches, so we can see the styling. We have an I want to menu, which allows us to do functionality, and you can put useful workflows, useful functions on this I want to menu to make people's lives easier. We also have a toolbar over here, and if I click on the toolbar, you'll see that we've got a set of tabs, and we've got a file tab, we've got a home tab, which allows us to do some identify options. We have a map tab, which allows us to upload external data, and we have a tools tab. The tools tab allows us to do things like measuring distance. So if I click on the measure area box, for example, and then I start drawing around this building, you'll see that we get measurements as we go around the building. And if I double click on the end, you'll see that we get the area and perimeter shown for that building. I'll just clear that measurement now. So that's what you get out of the box with the viewer. So let's now have a look how we can further configure the viewer to make it more user-friendly. So one of the things you might want to do to improve your user experience is to add a print template to our site. To do this, we go back to our manager, we click on the Site tab, and we click on the Print Template tab. We then click on Add a Print Template, and we give the print template a name. I'm going to call mine Landscape A4. I click on Next, and then I go to the location where the print template file is held. The print template file is created using a tool that's shipped with Geocortex called the Report and Print Designer. It's based loosely on a product called Active Reports and is included as part of the Geocortex delivery. I have an A4 print template available for me. I add the template to the site, and then I can edit this template. The sorts of things I can do is change the outputs formats that are available to the user. So in this case I've added TIFF, BMP, and I'll add PNG. I can set the scale bar units. I'm going to set those to meters. Then I'm going to apply the details at this point. I then go to map scales, and I can add my own map scale. So I can add a scale of 1 to 1250 and give it a display name of 1 to 1250. I can add another scale, let's say 1 to 2500, and give that a display name of 1 to 2500. And then I can set the default map scale to say 1 to 1250. So that's what's presented to the user when they first open up the print template. I can then set the resolutions that the print will come out at. So I get by default a 96 dot per inch resolution, which I'll call low resolution. I can add another resolution at say 200 dots per inch. And we might call that medium. And again, I can apply those changes. I can then go to the text fields. If I wanted to add a text field so that the user adds in a title, I can set a prompt for the user to add a title, and I'll give it a default value of webinar. And then finally, I can add a grid to my site or a graticule. Grid, I'm going to call the grid British National Grid. I'm going to click on OK, and I'm going to make British National Grid the default. I apply my changes, and I'm going to save my site. I'm then going to go back to my viewer. I'm going to refresh my viewer, and I need to refresh my viewer because I've changed the site. Then if I expand my toolbar, you'll see now that the print icon is now illuminated, and I can click on this print icon, and you'll see that the area that's going to fit on a piece of paper is shown in red here. If I zoom out a little bit, You can see that's what's going to fit on my piece of A4 paper. The first thing I can do is I can unlock the print preview and I can move the background mapping to center the object that I want in the center of my map. I can then select from the different formats that I've put in. I can select from the different resolutions. I can select the different grids if I've got any. I can change the scale and I can give the map a title. I'm going to say Chris Wright. I'm then going to generate the print by clicking on the print button. When it's complete, we get an option to open the print. If I click on Open File, you can see I've now got a title called Chris Wright. I've got a legend down the right-hand side, and I've got my map with its grid on. So very quickly and very easily, we can configure and add print templates. As I mentioned, these are created within the Plot and Report Designer, and the Plot and Report Designer looks like this. You can see there's my layout, and I can modify the layout and change things dynamically. So if I make the area of the plot a little bit smaller here, save the print template, go back to my viewer, cancel and redo the print. Still the same settings, and I'll just hit print. And this time what you'll see is that the print template has been adjusted with our new settings. So you can see you can quickly and easily configure print templates to suit your customers' needs. So let's move on now and have a look at workflows. Workflows allow administrators to string commands together in a simple and easy to use interface that provides an easy to use customized interface for their users. So I open up my workflow manager here, and then I'll open up a workflow file, and I'm going to open up a simple locate an object by its ID workflow. And you can see there's a series of steps in the workflow. So first of all, we display a form and get the user to type in an ID of a set of buildings. We then query for those buildings. We then select those buildings. We then get the extent of those buildings and then window to that extent. So a very simple set of tasks that you might do when using a GIS. So having looked at the workflow, we now need to add the workflow to our site. So we go back to our manager interface, and inside our manager interface we go to the workflows tab. Then we click on add a workflow because we're going to add the workflow to the site, and we give the workflow a name, and we'll call it find a building by ID. I'll then go and select the workflow file from its location. And here we have the find a building by ID workflow. We click on next, we click on finish, and now we have the workflow added to our site. What we now want to do is we want to add that workflow to a viewer. So we go to our viewer interface and we edit our viewer, and we go to the I want to menu because I'm going to add my workflows to the I want to menu, and we click on add a menu item, and we click on the text, and I'm going to say run a workflow. For the description, I'm going to have select and run a workflow. The command I'm going to do is I'm going to activate a view. So activate a view, and then the parameter is going to be the workflow list view, And if I had an icon that I wanted to put in, I could add an icon for it. But I'll usually leave it with the standard tick icon. I might want to have this at the top of my I want to menu, so I just can move it to the top there. I apply my changes and I save my site. I go back to my viewer and I refresh my viewer because we've added something to our site. I then have got my I want to menu and I've got the run a workflow option. When I click on that, it lists the available tasks for me, and one of them is find a building by ID, so I click on that. So the workflow prompts me for a property reference. And I know that there's a property around here called with a reference of 441, so I can then click search. The workflow then windows me to the buildings that reference 441, and I can click on each individual building and get the information and attributes about that. So that's a very simple workflow, but it's probably a common workflow that a lot of people will use to go and find assets, to go and find addresses, and so on and so forth. So there's a more complex workflow that we can have a look at. And this is a clip, zip, and ship workflow. So this is a workflow that would be quite useful for people to use. What it does is it asks the user to select the layers that they wish to extract. It then asks them to digitize an area that they want to clip out. It then asks them for an output format. And finally, it extracts the data and provides you with a download of that data. So let's go ahead and add this workflow to our site and run it. Again, I go back to my manager interface. I go to the site and I go to workflows. I then add a workflow and I'm going to call this clip, zip and ship. I then go and find the workflow file. I add the workflow to my site. I save the site. Because it's going to be under the workflow list view, I do not need to add it to my viewer now. But I do need to refresh my viewer because I've added the workflow to the site. So if I go and run a workflow, I can now select clip, zip and ship. And it goes away and finds a list of the layers that are available for me to clip. And I can select either a single layer or I could select multiple layers. So I'll select address point and building assets. I can then take the current extent of the window. I can create a polygon or a rectangle. I'm just going to take the current map extent. I'm going to go next. I then get asked for a format that I wish to output, so I'm going to output in shapefile. I click finish. It clips and extracts the data and then creates me a download file. I'm going to create the download file inside my temp folder. And then I'll go to that folder location. And what I'll do is I'll unzip that file. And then I've got a folder here. And inside there, I've got my addresses and my buildings as shapefiles. What we can do now is show another functionality of Geocortex, and that's the ability to load external data. So we've just created a zip file from the shape file, from the data on the screen. We've created a zip file. So I can go to my Tools tab, and I can go to my Upload Data task. I can then choose the shapefile that I want to load from my output folder. So I'll select the address and the building shapefile. I can open those and I give them layer names. And these are going to be green dots. There's my buildings and my dots there. So you can see this is the data that I selected for clipping and exporting. If I uploaded each individual file, I could put them into separate layers. And they appear in my layer list here. So we'll just refresh my viewer here. So that concludes the demonstration. If you have any questions or you'd like to make any comments, please email us on geocortex@onespatial.com, or if you'd like further information, you can also email us at geocortex@onespatial.com, or you can register for our upcoming webinars. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me today.